Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chairs. This week we have infamous Mr. Lenny Brown. It's going to be fun. So sit back and relax and listen to Lenny for an hour or so. Hi, everybody. Guess what we have for you today on the interview chair? We have none other than the infamous Mr. Lenny Brown. Hey, Lenny, how's it going, man?
Very good, very good. Happy holidays.
You too, and you're safe back from Orlando. Was it a long trip?
Well, it's an easy trip for me. It was 7 hours, and then so it's not the hardest that some people have to do. Yeah.
I think
but
I was talking.
Big fan of what you're doing, and I love all. And I try to listen to all of them while I was driving or at home or taking a break. So I'm a big fan of the stories and everything that everybody has to say. I love it.
Well, you're always messaging me with new ideas, so I think it's great. So.
Yeah.
You ready? You ready for your turn? All right, brother. Here we go. Tell me how you got started in dogs and how old you were when you first started in the sport of dogs.
My father got me a German Shepherd, and I believe I was about 10 years old. And I don't know the reason how we gravitated to the Shepherds. He said it was me, but I think it was him, and I believed, I went along with it. And we went to a lot of the story that I'll talk about is it's a lot of old school style of how it started. The traditional breeding kennel. We went there and we picked out a puppy. My dad let me pick out the puppy. It was a litter of 3. And the reason I picked this puppy was it had a white tip on its tail. And I took that puppy. We named her Tracy. Goes home and be's the family pet. And of course, from there, a lot of the breeders, encouraged their new puppy buyers to go to the puppy matches and to go to dog shows. And we did that. I lived in Weirton, West Virginia. I grew up there, which was outside of Pittsburgh, which was right next to Steubenville, Ohio. It was kind of like that upper
that little section there
up there. And so we went to the Armory to the local dog show, and I was hooked from day one. And it was kind of funny in the 10 questions that you asked me. I think from that moment, I never wanted, when I found out about dog shows and handling, I don't think I ever wanted to do anything else. And that's when I said that to you on that 10 questions. I thought about it. I was telling Tracy when we were driving, I never wanted to do anything else, Yeah. So it kind of just started from there. And Shepherd specialties were very predominant. So, and the area that I grew up in and I lived in was a very hot spot for big, powerful, meaningful shows. You had Northern Ohio, the German Shepherd Dog Club of Northern Ohio, you had the German Shepherd Dog Club of Western Pennsylvania, and then you'd also would run over to the German Shepherd Dog Club of Anne Arundel in Maryland. I mean, those 3 were the hottest, on the East Coast, So, and that's, kind of how that happened.
So how old were you when you went in the show ring?
Let's see, 10. And then I would say, let's say 12 before. I mean, maybe 10 as the puppy matches, but maybe before I went into the ring was, let's say 12. I think 12. Yeah. I don't know the exact, my dad used through the breeder, a professional handler by the name of Terry Howard. And he was a shepherd handler, and he did a lot of winning. Jim was at that time. Jimmy would have been showing Manhattan, and maybe ending with Manhattan when I first got into dogs. And when I think I first got into dog, that would have been '87 because he won Westminster in '87 with Hatter. I mean, I definitely knew who Hatter was, and it would have been that area. And then I think he was doing custom made. And I mean, Jim would always been a hero, but Terry ran the specialty shows. He was married to Linda Bankhead at the time. My dad used him as a handler, and I just thought those guys were the greatest people in the world. You know, they were. I was never a big sports buff. I mean, I played sports, you know, in school and everything like that, but I was never that involved. You know, it was those shepherd handlers that I thought were everything to me, you know. So, yeah. So that's kind of how that was. And, you know, shepherds have been my life ever since then. You know, I don't really know how to do anything else, you know.
So is it over? That's it. We're done. Okay. I'll talk to you later. No, we're not.
Yeah. Well, what happened, my mom was a principal. So education was extremely meaningful in my household. And so I did as much as I could with the dogs while going to school and throwing some sports, you know, in there. And then how would I say it started? I didn't really care a lot about all breed shows or other breeds then, just because shepherds were, when you would go to even all breed shows, there were, you know, 50 to 100. It was like Goldens. It was 50 to 100 every time. So I didn't really care. What made me even veer off a little bit was Sam Lawrence's involvement with other breeds, because Sam was such a he judged so many shepherds shows and so well respected and did so much for the German Shepherd Dog Club of America that I knew the name. I met him a few times, and then, you know, he was owning dogs, Lonesome Dove and Bart Simpson, Kryptonite, you know, so then I would catch on. I mean, I think any information I could about dogs, I would suck in as a sponge. I mean, I was just captivated by all of anything that was dog related. So I think that's how that kind of all went forward. You know, I remember Michael Kemp coming with Lacey to Western Reserve when that was such a powerhouse show, you know, and you know, that kind of was pretty cool because Jim wasn't there. So I kind of was just kind of fall around watching Michael, you know, show the wire. I mean, he would not have known anything what I was trying to do, but, you know, I definitely would read the magazines and know the connections, you know. Yeah. So, and Bart Simpson and with Bob Covey and things like that. So then, of course, at that age of my teens and the time that I saw when Jimmy would come in, I don't think I ever saw Jim lose. I really thought to myself why somebody would not want to own a German Shepherd, because they never lost. I mean, Jim never lost. You know, then Mystique came in, and you know how that. I mean, doing custom made, and then Mystique came in, and I mean, those dogs were just killing it. You know, all over. And I mean, I
remember being on the Tar Heel circuit when you had Mystique out. I'm pretty sure he won every best in show. Yeah. You know, not to get off of anything, you want to know a funny story? Now that you said that is I was running River, you know, this year, and I got to tell you this now. I said I was going to throw it in, and I had goals when I showed River of what I wanted to do, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, sorry.
but you know, everything of how I knew how to show this dog, I learned from Jim, you know, and Jim and I always had a rule. Because if he was ever judging, I would never ask him, you know, about shows or anything of that nature. He kind of like let me go. I'd ask for advice in life, but never like to pick a dog show or anything like that. Well, anyways, when he was off, you know, last year, this year we just did, I didn't talk to him for a while. It went, you know, some time lapsed, and he knew what my goals were. And because we had goals, you know, he would set goals on dogs. So I wanted to be top herding going into Westminster since they moved it to June. I thought it was very important to go into top herding. And he calls me and he says, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm upper Michigan somewhere. And he says, "Well, how things going? I haven't talked to you for so long." And I said, "Oh, Jim, things are going very well. I mean, we're going into Westminster. We're top herding right now. And we're 5 best in shows in a row." And Will, I swear to you, he says to me, "Oh, I had 22 on Mystique." and then he says, "And then I got in the group, and then I won 19 more in a row." My mouth dropped on the phone like this. And I said to him, I said, "I don't think I have 22 friends in life that would want to get best in show, let alone, you know, in a row." So I just, you know, it just rolls right off the tongue for him, you know.
Oh, yeah. It was an amazing time. Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
That was there.
No, but nobody today does that, goes into the Tar Heel of all shows and whacks every day.
I'm sure it was every day. Every day.
Yeah.
So it was fun to watch, but, you know.
Yes. Yeah. So back to where I was at. I had to throw that in when you said that.
No,
where were we talking about?
You were still a teenager, and you were
that was going good, and I actually people would have said it was a very good compliment, but I had like natural ability. You know, that breed just came to me naturally, and I took a lot of criticism and advice, and I never let it bother me. And I would say I never did juniors, and of course juniors were not anywhere how they are today. You know, even the encouragement. I don't think anybody ever really gave me any positive encouragement, I swear to you, except for Terry Howard. And he was just always so nice to me and let me, back now you're begging people to help you show dogs. I couldn't get into the ring because there were so many shepherd handlers. I would wait by the ring gate, literally, to take in the 6 to 9 puppy dog, begging to go, you know, into and they would bypass me like it was nobody's business. But I think I was so young, and it was before you were in puberty or hormonal or things like that would hurt somebody's feelings and steer you away. I just think I knew that's what I wanted to do, you know, in life. And I just kept plugging away, you know, till I got to my later teens. And then I met some more an all-rounder handler by the name of Bob Double and his partner Jim Martin. Yep. And I was going to college. I was going to college at that time. And I went and worked for them part-time while I was going into school, and it kind of just worked. And, you know, they were not in the higher level as when I went to work at Jim's, but they taught me so much.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I didn't have the fundamentals of you know, how you, it was, you know, the shepherd specials were a different time about how to take care of dogs and things like that. So they taught me a lot about, you know, basic fundamentals, you know, and, you know, even about being a handler, even about doing your book work, you know, and the business end of it. They taught me a lot about the business end of it. You know, they both were they had other jobs and were pretty successful in life. So that I was probably there for 3 years while I was going to school.
Yeah, I vaguely remember you with Bobby. I remember.
Yeah. And they were, it breaks my heart that both of them have passed, just wonderful guys and took care of me and met my family. And I could never thank them enough for everything they did for me, and still I think they knew my love for shepherds. So I would always get to go show them and go over. But, the ringside help that I think I did for them, it helped everybody out. So, that was pretty good. And then I grabbed it. That's when, I knew Jim, growing up. And then that's when he just had the Carrollton house kennel going, and Dallas just came on the scene. And that's when things really, just kind of took off. And he thought he needed the help, and he thought that I would be an asset to him. And of course, it was probably I knew that's where I needed to go if after talking to him and talking to some mentors, Terry, of course, and Bob and Jim were upset that I was leaving, but they definitely understood what I was doing. I never wanted to do anything else, and this is where I needed to be. So, and then, that kind of whole, me moving down to Atlanta and that saga took off. And I worked for Jim for 13 years. Wow. I never thought he was going to stop. I never did. I thought he was going to, just die in the ring, and that's just how we were going to do it. And the day that he said he was going to start judging, I think we were in his office, and I think I just fell over, So I couldn't believe it was going to happen. So, yeah. So...
Now, tell me how that came about. Did you approach him, or how did it work?
I don't remember how it even happened. Of course. He was looking, because Jamie was there, Clute was there, and then Jamie was burnt out. He wanted to do something different. And I think Jim was just putting on with the breeding. Of course I asked him. But I don't remember really how it happened, to be truthful with you. I know I had to finish school, and we did that. And I think he just said, when I was ready, come down. I was seeing Heidi's Faith at the time, yeah. And he went. I think we all just kind of went down there. I'd have to ask him. I don't even know how many years. That was 2001. I went down there because at that time I remember that because it was my bank code, to go down there. So, Dallas was just coming on the scene, and the next year in 2002 is when we were going to go for Top Dog, and it was just, and Jim was so, that show, me moving down there changed my life forever. But it was, kind of when you say giving advice to young handlers, then I'm going to jump around again. It was sink or swim at that time, and I threw everything I had into moving to Atlanta. Gave up everything, which was more just family oriented. Of course I wasn't married or a child or didn't really have any money, you know what I mean? So the positive thing is I got to be around German Shepherds, and I didn't have anything to lose. I didn't care what he paid me. I don't even, of course, you got paid a lot less back then, but I think I was so happy that he said yes, that I don't even remember what I got paid, I don't think I cared. We all up in the apartment and we were showing dogs and we were all hungry and that was one thing about Jim. Everybody that worked there, maybe not the cleaning crew because the operation, that was old school kennel. It was at the time I was down there. It was close to 70 to 100 dogs. You had people that just worked in the kennel. And then of course you had the assistants that worked on the dogs, but I was just in heaven, however you looked at it, So it was definitely an experience that I'll never forget. But, we all gave our lives to Jim, but we loved every minute of it, So, and then the breeding of you learned every aspect of becoming a handler because you were around good dogs, which I think is very, very important. I remember going, and we had 7 Best in Show winners at the same time in the truck. 7. Nobody has that today. Then you had the breeding program that he was doing with Sherry. And I mean, there was good ones were just falling from the sky. I mean, you were just constantly around good animals and you had to give it your best, because to keep up with the Joneses kind of a deal. I would say between him, again, cell phones, no internet, none of that stuff was going when I remember him coming into the kennel one day and said, it was like 10 a.m. And he said, stop what you're doing. We're going to go get cell phones. And I bitched because I remember my dad got me one for college so I can call home, and call my mom. But I mean, you didn't use them of, how important they are in today's society. I mean, he went over there and then I didn't want the bill, I didn't want the that's the reason I didn't want the phone, and now it's connected to your hip for Christ's sakes. So, but, and then Jim was, probably the first one of getting the young, talented, hungry assistants and putting us into the ring. As we talked before, I mean, I think I had 33 Best in Shows just being an assistant for Jim.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I mean, that's what it was funny, as I said earlier, talking to Catterson about that panel of Jim, Michael, Ken Murray. We're up in South Dakota, and then who had more Best in Shows, the judging panel or everybody in the and I know Kenny had when Paul told me that, because Catterson and I are dear friends. When Paul told me that Kenny said that he was in the 40s, I went back and was trying to figure out, and I got to 33. I couldn't get more than 33. But I mean, it was such an experience.
Well, as an assistant, Ken was saying he had 40 as an assistant for Cooper, right?
Yeah. It was. Yeah. I mean, that's just, and I was like happier than hell just working for Jim. You learn so much, and especially, again, there were group dogs. I mean, dogs there that won groups that we never even got to be a top animal. It was just crazy. He'd let me take some of the, the youngster, the K-Leaf dogs out there, and they'd win a group or two. And then, they either got bred or he had something more idea would want to show or something of that nature, So I remember a story. We won. He had this bitch that he bought, Kreidler's Nutmeg Signature. And he ended up doing her. And I don't think he was 100%. He bought her for Sherry. And I don't think and the breeding program. And I don't think he was 100% knowing that he was going to show her. So he sends me to the show. It's at the end of the year, November, in Concord. It was like 1,300 dogs in Concord. And he said, just show her. I think he ran to Columbus that weekend. And he says, take her and see what happens. So I took her, and he calls me Friday night. It was a 3-day show. And he said, how'd it go? How things going? I said, we won. And he says, well, that's good. You got her slowed down to win the breed. I said, Jim, we went best under Houston for 1,300 dogs. We take a look at her, and Jim, Houston was so well respected, you know what I mean? Especially in Jim's eyes, when I told him that Houston put her up and, he kept asking me, Houston, he says, is Jimmy going to show her? I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, there was just so many good ones to do. He ended up showing her, and she was, I don't know if she was top herding, but she was definitely number one shepherd. She could have been top herding. I don't remember. But it was stories like that. He just couldn't believe that, that first time out, Best in Show. I mean, the animals at that kennel were just amazing,
Yeah, and they weren't just all shepherds, because you had I remember at one point you had an Afghan, a Brittany, and you had the Border Collies. And
my first Best in Show was on the Irish Wolfhounds. So, which is, so it was so funny about that. And I think my second Best in Show was on the Cavalier, Adagio. And then the third best in show was I got to show Genuine Risk under John Reeve Newsom. Yeah, wow. Jim had a family emergency and had to go, and I got to show Jenny under John Reeve, and it was so lucky, which is a cherished moment for me. I got to put a best in show on every special that he showed, except for I never got to show Dallas. Yeah. I wish that would have happened. But at that time, he was going for top dog. And I mean, we were Jim did everything, for that. He was so into Dallas and the breedings, because I believe Dallas maybe is the only dog. He was he was number one dog all breeds. He had 100 best in shows. He had 100 champions. And then one of his Genuine Risk had 100 best in shows. And I think he's the only dog to do that, wow. Which was pretty impressive, as a sire and as a producer. I mean, because let's face it, I mean, the whole object of all of this is supposed to be breeding stock, so when you have 100 best in show winning dog that, wins that kind of an award and then turns around and throws out 100 champions, which it was more after that, but it was at the time we stopped at 100. And then to turn around and one of those turned out to win 100 best in shows. Pretty nice, Yeah,
it's pretty impressive.
Yes.
So you were with Jim for, you said 13 years?
Every bit of 13. Yes.
13.
I was able, I was 21 when I started. I was able to, to drink, and I mean, legally. And then we went down there, and I mean, he just kind of threw you into it. And for me, it was definitely, I thought I was the least one there that had the experience at that level. I mean, I learned, I opened up and kept everything as a sponge, because Jamie and Heidi and things, they definitely had, a lot more traveling ability, knowing the world a little bit more than I ever did. I was a West Virginia boy that didn't leave that area. So, it took me a little bit to catch on. So, but I was probably the only one that would never leave, So I think everybody else had different visions, and I just figured, it would all come to me. And I was just more, I think for me, with the love of the shepherds is what kept everything together, So, yeah. And then I got to show the Border Collie Merlin. We got to win the group at Westminster when I was 25 years old.
I remember that.
I mean, that was something, I never thought that he was going to, win that one. And then, I mean, that was under Mrs. Collier. That was a big one,
Now, you showed Merlin mostly, like you showed him most of his career yourself, didn't you?
Well, we all, Heidi did the first year. And then Heidi had, different plans, and she wanted to leave, and then I wasn't leaving, So then I got to show him, and then I think I started January. I think I did him in the Florida circuit. And Border Collies then weren't as popular. I mean, I think he was the trendsetter of all that. And of course, back then there was no reserve best in shows, so you didn't have that angle to get a dog going. So, and then that was old school Westminster, everything was in the Garden. And then we won that under Mrs. Collier. And I mean, that just took off. Ooh. That was probably a milestone of, I think Jim really thought that I was going to leave. And to be truthful, I think that was a thing that really probably tightened our relationship. That I think he knew that I wasn't going to leave after that when I said I wasn't, and we just went back to when we flew home to, business is business. But I never, ever had any inkling about leaving and thought I was prime time or big shot or any of that nature, whatever. I mean, it didn't even cross my mind. And I think he thought that I was going to, but
sure. I mean, natural, we all would think that.
No, he had to quit for me to, and then I still didn't want to leave,
So did Merlin end up top herding dog? I know he was
No, Jim won. Listen to this story. Listen, now, let me tell you. We worked in his office. We worked in the office. And I mean, that was old school. That was old school. When a dog, when an animal won Westminster, they were set for the year. I mean, let's face it. That was back then. So after that, it just took off. Boom, boom, boom. So Jim decides it was Louisville, Raleigh. He doesn't bring a special out till the last day of Raleigh. Okay. So he brings out, Genuine Riskert. I don't remember who he was doing. It must have been Tenacity he was doing. Yeah, because he showed Jenny and she went fourth. Yes, that's what he was going to bring out, Tenacity. And I said, I was being all cocky. I said, you're not going to touch me. This dog. You know what I mean? I'm 18, and that was Quaker Oats was, the trophy to go for. I said, Jim, I'm 18 ahead of you, and this dog is as hot as can be. And he spins around how he has those glasses like this. He says to me, do you want to mess with the kid? And I said, yeah. I think he beat me by like 38. I mean, he blew me out of the water. And he let me pick some shows. I was 25, dumb, stupid. I think I picked every wrong show known to man. But it was a good experience, and it was fun, and
That's a great story.
I was number 2 herding to him. So I really didn't get in trouble too much. And nobody really razzed me too much when you go number 2 to Jim. So, it was pretty good.
Oh,
so,
exactly. My God.
Yeah. I tell you, I mean, it was probably the best thing, like I said, that I ever did. I probably should just write a book, and I'd probably make a lot more money off of that book than I would showing dogs. That's for sure. Yeah. So that's where with Merlin, I mean, I think we got, what did we get? 18? I think we got 18 best in shows, on him, So that was pretty good,
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But for my 20s, I think besides the winning, I mean, that was fun. Don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody does this to win. But I think it was more of the knowledge of the breeding with the shepherds that because I knew that's the way I wanted to go. And I was always to take it back. Let's rewind a minute. I always had very good business people in my life. I was very attracted to the business end of the dogs. Still am today. Jim was pretty good. And I had a lot of good mentors in business that Jim was always good. Don't do what I did, do what I tell you to do, kind of a deal. The mistakes that he made and also having different incomes to come in, to make this all work. The mistake that I think that I may have made or believed is I thought that all these handlers were millionaires. That's probably the biggest mistake that I made. And when I learned that they weren't, what I mean? I just had some different ideas of what I wanted to do. And, with maybe some breeding and selling some dogs and selling some, show dogs to people and, the kennel and things of that nature. So, that was kind of more excited me about everything than the winning. And the winning was great. I mean, everybody wants to do it,
sure.
But there was more other things that I wanted to get out of it, and also about, you got to know dogs. And I mean, we only hung around dog people and we only talked about dogs and I think one of the best things that I learned was to evaluate. Not every specialist perfect. I think that's where most people make their mistakes. And probably what helped me was at gyms is you saw so many good dogs that maybe I always had that that mindset that I wasn't going to run out of good dogs. Then you showed an animal for 2 years and you did the best you possibly could with, showing off the attributes to that animal and disguising, I don't want to use the word faults, but things that you could change animals. And then you did the best that you could in 2 years. Speed up. Some of the people I think have, turned that into 3 years. And then now you'll see some of the people that are so involved about they can't let the winning go. It's that person that you see, the dog never goes away. It's exhausting,
right.
And, but, of course, the whole dog game has changed, in every aspect of how you look at life. But, I don't know. I just, I guess I was taught never to lie of what you were doing. And then some dogs are better than, or animals are better than others, but you only can show what you have to work with. And sometimes you get into, maybe a little drier spell than you like. And sometimes, these special animals come out that could almost make a career for someone. So, and I was very fortunate that, not just in an all breed way, but maybe in my specialty career that I had some of these great animals, that just gravitated, my way and helped me, define my career of what I wanted to do, So I've been very blessed, and I've had some phenomenal breeders that I worked for, and that just gave me good dog after good dog, and that was very important. And of course, I mean, as that's probably taken the hit as society has made it with the cost and everything of how hard it is for breeders to keep going, and I think a lot of handlers got into breeding because, their backs were against the wall, at least the smart ones, knew what they were dealing with when it comes to, the dogs, and I think that's what kind of, raises the bar a little bit is with handling. If you're not going to recognize the attributes and the faults of your animal, then you're never going to gain go anywhere in this business, because you're just lying to yourself, so, at least that's how I see it.
No, you're right. I'm going to take you back a bit. I want to know the day that Jim told you he was retiring.
I can tell you that it was early. We just got back from those shows in Tallahassee. I don't remember. Well, let's see. What year would that have been? Ava was born. Shit. Ava was Ava a year old? I'm trying to think of how it happened, how many years I did by myself, because he gave me Rumor's father to show, which was the Ike dog from Canada, from Alberta. I'm trying to say how we came over from the Tallahassee shows, the Panhandle circuit. That's when it all happened. But the good thing about it is at that time, that I was there, I was doing so much of the business end of it for him because he got involved in the deer farm that nothing was, it was more of an emotional thing for me than a actual doing it. I was entering the dogs through the entry service. We were doing all the hotels. So I was doing 90% of the business aspect, so that wasn't the only thing that changed on that aspect was it went from using his credit card to my credit card. I mean, nothing really. And to be truthful, now that I think about it, I think he made me get my own, and then I worked off of my own. Because let me tell you, that will make somebody, when you have somebody else's credit card, it's a lot easier just to go haywire than when that
exactly.
when that $1,000 a month, expense bill is in your start cutting back. I believe you. I think he did that to me to teach me a lesson. But we talked about it, and he set me up pretty good. I mean, by then, all the clients were with me, and it's not like I didn't know. It was more of a sink or swim kind of a deal, and I guess I just never believed it wasn't going to work. Did
he call you into his office and say, Lenny, I decided to.
Yeah. Well, I would walk over and we would have coffee every morning and talk, dog. It was kind of like a routine kind of a deal, and say how the dogs were going, and I think we were both smoking at the time, and we'd have cigarettes and coffee and just talk in the morning and just do what we did. And, and then he just kind of laid it out right in the beginning. But, I never wanted him out of my life. So again, it was more emotional than actually having to do the work, because when he gets wrapped up in something, he was so devoted to the deer farm. I was going to half the shows by myself or whoever was with me at the time, and Patrick and everybody else. So, it wasn't anything we couldn't handle. So it was good. But, that's the way that he wanted to go. And it just, kind of made all sense. See, I couldn't buy the kennel. We couldn't get the kennel license. So that's why I never stayed in Georgia. So I had this property. I had this property up here in the mountains, and I had a lot of clients on the north side. So it just made sense when they were giving me such a rough time that I would just go up where I am now and just set up shop and start showing dogs. And that's basically kind of what we did, So, and I just keep on adding and adding and adding, and making it work. So
for sure. So you've been on your own for how long now?
Let's see. Let's say 10 years,
Isn't that long? Wow.
Let's just say 32 to, I'm 43. Oh, sorry. I'm 43 now. So maybe 12 years, Yeah.
Wow. Time flies, brother. Holy jumping.
Ava's going to be 9. That's, we just had her birthday for Thanksgiving. That's the, and then, running this dog, for top herding. And we did it so many years with Jim, but I guess, this was the first one that I did basically by myself. It takes a lot out of you, it definitely takes, and it's a lot easier doing the traveling in your 20s than it is in your 40s, but mileage on you. Yeah. Yeah. And things are just different than when it was. I remember when what was it? Dallas finished top dog and he had 103 best in shows. And let's say, I think he had 68,000 points. That's nothing now.
Yeah.
That is absolutely, and we hit every dog show we possibly could because, Jim wanted that Quaker Oats Award, which was, the how many group first there was. Right. And then now, it's just like, oh my, the amount of shows you have to do to keep it going is just, oh my Lord, just wears you out.
Oh, it's crazy.
Way too many, way too many dog shows. Yeah. So
let me ask you another question. You've been on your own for quite some time now. Now, what if a youngster comes up to you and tells you, Mr. Brown, I want to be a professional dog handler? What advice are you going to give that youngster?
Well, one, you would definitely the education would be very important because it's a little nerve-wracking, scary to see how things are going to go in the future. I don't know if I would discourage someone. I would probably look at them and look in their eye to see if they're hungry. Because if you're not hungry, if you're not willing to throw it all in, you're going to drown, especially of now. The whole aspect of even people working for you is different. I think every day of my life, I was afraid that he was going to fire me. and a lot of people were in that aspect. Maybe even if you went up, I'm thinking of Jim's kennel and thinking of, the only person that comes off the top of my head of matching it would have been Peter's, and of that amount of dogs and that amount of good dogs. I'm not saying there's anybody else. It's just the top of my head.
Sure.
We were so, I guess the era of people, that are in my age bracket. We gave so much for them, and I don't think you see that today. There's no loyalty like.
Oh no! You 13 years with Jim. And you would have kept on going. That's
I ever would have left.
Yeah.
Ever would have left. But I guess I would say for that question would have been, you got to throw everything in. You got to give it your all, and I think a little bit of important on the business end of it is I think you would have to be a little bit breed oriented, and you would have to have that breed, for an example, to carry you through in tough times. And that shepherd breed has done everything for me and my family, the people that I met, especially, during COVID, that was a scary time for anybody because the whole animal business, let alone dog shows, but even the boarding business. I had clients that definitely took care of me, in that time. I never borrowed any money or anything from the government, but I had clients that took care of me, and none of that would have ever happened if it wasn't for German Shepherd dogs. Right. I owe my whole life to that breed, and I will promote them as long as I can. You're definitely not going to do it when you're older. And, I think that's why I do it. If I was a millionaire, which I'm not, I think I would run these dogs for free just because this is what I like to do, and, those are just I guess it's giving me back. Even now, I'm on the board for the German Shepherd Dog Club of America because there's just things that I would like to do, to help with the sport that I think that I can do. So, giving back, I think the way the juniors is going is good in the right direction because there is nobody that gave me that kind of support or encouragement. I had zero encouragement of sometimes I ask myself of how I kept doing it, because you didn't have that kind of positive people to tell you every time you go in. I think they've changed it a little bit, wrapped up a little bit too much on the wins. That's a little bit, I think they're gravitating the kids in a little bit in the wrong way, but it's still good. When you went down the Royal Canin show, the Orlando show, Michael and everybody involved, they got that show running like an oiled machine now. It is, 5,000 some dogs. And that's going to be the mecca of dog shows. That can even make or break a top spot. It already had this year. I'd rather not get into which group it was, but there were several groups that it definitely changed, through the outcome of that dog show. But I walked by the juniors ring, and there's a lot of participants. There's a lot of good, young kids going involved. I do think they should think about that. The kids that are working for handlers, now, my God, they're gone all day. I don't think that's the way that, you really need to go that way. Right. I think that only thing that I would think that it also goes back to the sport of losing the sight of the breeding and, the whole breeding stock. But
yeah, I don't know if you listened to. Did you listen to Valerie Noonan's interview I did a few weeks ago?
I haven't. With everything going on, I haven't got into Valerie's yet. That's the only one. It was
excellent, but she talks about that as well, like almost a 4-H type mentality where we teach these kids about breeding and about how we all start in dogs. That's how they.
They've almost come to such a good base with the juniors. And you'd have to throw this to the business end of it. But I almost wondered if they could bring off, maybe even have their own day where it's just dedicated to the kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And something of that nature. And, another thing that they could probably do is they could basically almost maybe give a day to the kids down there that anything's only happening for them, where everybody, parents and maybe mentors and things that can watch them, and maybe even the mentor can work on dogs and then kind of veer off and watch, their kid or the kid that is working for them show the dog and then go back. It would give the dogs a break, because I would think that they've came to that level with how many kids were down there. It kind of, where I was set up, which was that same area where we were the year before, I kept gravitating past them, and, they get such a good entry on them. And now they're even making, I didn't know this, Courtney told me, because, with her kid going to do the juniors, for next year, they have to turn in their grades, which I thought was an excellent, coming from somebody of my, education background of my family. That would have been very important,
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't hear that. That's great.
Yeah.
So what's next for Lenny Brown? Do you see judging in your future, Lenny?
Oh, I would like to. The judging. I got to. Here's a topic that we could kind of throw in is judging. I got to judge a fraternity right after COVID, right when COVID came back, and it was. It made me think about things different. As a handler, I don't really get that jacked out of shape when it doesn't fall my way. I definitely look at it, different before I blow up. I might blow up on an occasion, but believe me, I'm like for 5 minutes and then I'm pretty much done. I can keep it pretty cool. Judging is, I believe, is all over the place now, and in all aspects. I mean, I definitely think that's the way that something needs to get targeted, and I mean in all aspects. You have your good judges, that you respect, and you have some judges that maybe aren't ready for the assignments, that they have taken on. And I think I saw maybe a little bit of that in Orlando, but. They talk about mentorship, but I think maybe there should be some mentorship when it comes through with the judges. And I hope I never want to stop learning from dogs, but I feel that maybe that's the way the judging is going, that maybe some, not all, there are good judges, but if you look at everything, the way the sport is going, it's not the venues, because it doesn't make people not go to the show. Is the venue. They just won't go to that venue. It's not the handlers, because they'll just get a new handler. It's not a breeder, because they'll just find a different breeder. The most thing that I feel that can discourage somebody from going to the show is what happens in the ring.
Right.
We can get off of that subject and go into that they're making it very hard for people that have dedicated their whole lives, in getting breeds, groups, etc. And you're not going to get your, let's face it, better dog people giving up what they have to go judge, because let's face it, you have to have 3 groups at best to even get hired on a consistent basis. Right. So, who was the last one who they gave the group to that I like? Allison Sutterman, terriers. Yes. You know what I mean? Absolutely. But I mean, I hope she doesn't mind me using, her as an example. It's just the last one we got talking about it. I mean, one group isn't really going to help anything, So I think they have to attack a situation where for somebody to give up the handling, they just can't still be floating on that one group. That's going to mix judging into the business aspect of, let's face it, there's some good judges out there that make a pretty nice little living judging dogs, and they do a wonderful job. And that's probably why they're great people. They do a good job. They do an honest job, or at least they do an honest job in the opinion that they see it. You can follow them. There's a lot of good ones of that human nature. But I think that sometimes I wish, especially coming from German Shepherd dogs, that they would ask. I wish that some would come and ask more questions, Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's just more of a healthy conversation about dogs. I mean, I just think, that's just in my opinion, that, coming off of Facebook, I mean, which I'm not a big fan of it, but they have like the judge's report card. Oh, I think that's terrible, because I don't think anybody goes in there for the most part to try to screw it up. You know what I mean? But sometimes I feel that when they get attacked is maybe they're a little bit over their head, so, just.
I feel like in my younger days that there was more open conversations between judges and breeders and handlers. And you needed those things. I learned by listening, so.
Absolutely. And going back to them, I mean, even to this one, you have to tread on needles now if you wanted to even talk to somebody. Right. You have to come up with a peace sign, like, let's go ahead and talk about something, because, they'll kind of, the conversation can go the wrong way, And believe me, that's what taught me into, it takes a lot for me to get riled up, So
I can still remember being in the ring showing a dog to Jane Forsyth, and she'd be going over my dog on the table, and she'd be telling me about the dog she had just judged like two ahead of me, that I should take a look at that dog and look at the attributes of that dog. Even though I was in the ring trying to push my dog at her, she was trying to tell me, well, there's two dogs ahead of you. That's a really good dog, Will.
Well, I mean, those are, let's face it. I mean, that's old school dogs. And I mean, of course, yourself for doing what you're doing now with these programs that you're putting on, or even somebody like me that's a student that loves to listen to every one of them. I mean, probably, the stories coming from like Ken Murray was one of my favorite ones. I mean, Ken can remember things.
Oh my God. Unbelievable. Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. But I mean, he hung around so many true dog people, and that's how you learn. But I just think some of the people are just going through the motions to get hired. And I think, maybe, and I'm not saying that people are doing a bad job. I just think that's the way that needs to be. And I'm not saying there's a right answer or a wrong answer, but those are the things that need to be, if you want to use the word, addressed, because that's going to be the way it's going to make people go the different direction. And the reason I say that is, in today's society, there's so many things to do. And I think somebody, let's say my generation, you're almost taught now to walk away. You don't have the fighting that you used to do, in the world. I think today's society is more about, at least for my generation of parents, you just pick your kid up and you walk away and you just go away. You don't get into altercations or anything of that nature. And I think that's why a little bit of the dog game went the wrong way, is because, maybe you want to say you pack your toys and you go home, and nobody's going to stick it out, and let's face it, I think they've drug a dog show is considered an event. And I think they've drug the event out a little bit too long, and I don't think we're getting, I personally think how the Canadians do the group system is the way that it should go. Because when you get the people there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and there's a bunch of dogs in a group being judged, that's what gravitates people there. Nobody wants to come at 10 and wait till 3 o'clock to watch the group event. Right. I'm not saying all shows, right, but I was always a fan, coming from the German Shepherd group, and the Canadian National was kind of like our sister club. For us going up there, I did get to spend some time up there, and I always thought that system was, a better system of keeping people intrigued through the day.
Yeah, I agree. And when we have our bigger events, we have the Friday and Sunday. We'll follow that procedure, and then Saturday we have groups starting.
Yeah. Correct. And I don't think every dog show, but when you get a family there of a family coming in of 4, and they got the kids, and maybe you get, maybe the wife wants to be there and the husband doesn't, and then they want to leave. If everybody wants to see competition, or you wouldn't be at the show. So I think if they did something where it keeps people wanting to be there, or an attractiveness, it would help out a lot, because you're not going to get the, you don't have people nowadays with a lot of land. People live in neighborhoods, and there's more things to do in neighborhoods. So
many distractions nowadays. There's
correct.
So many things. So like if you're interested in the herding group, and you're showing Aussies, and then you want to stay and watch the group, you don't want to show at 8 o'clock and then I get it, wait till 3 o'clock to see the group competition, even though you're interested. Right. It's just no matter how interested you are, there's other things that need to be done. So
correct. Yeah.
So you didn't really answer my question though, Lenny. You didn't tell me if you were going to judge.
No, I would like to, but I'm hoping, of course, that's 20 years. I have a lot more things to do and, in my life that I want to do. But yeah, if they made it a lot easier, I would, would want to do it. I don't know if I would go through the hoops, or maybe I would just do the shepherds. But yeah, I would like to. I definitely would like to. But they definitely make it difficult for the people that definitely have put their whole life into it. And I think there's a little bit of that. How do you want to say? I don't know the correct terminology. Like everybody's equal, but everybody's not equal when it comes to the dogs. At least I see it. And I think there are certain individuals, male or female, that should have just had a freaking pass, because them on a bad day could never do anything to as a dog person, mess anything up, or at least they can justify of what they did, which I think is the most important thing, is justifying your actions. I see a little bit of it now is, when a judge wants to do something and they point, but they point at the wrong times on procedure. Or they're gonna run you around and not put up the best mover, or they're gonna stand you in the middle of the ring and not put up the best, breed type of proportions or something like that. So I think that's when they get attacked. On either in conversation or on social media, which everybody's any old timer said that social media was going to be the downfall of the sport. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but that's the way times, have just evolved. You just have to accept it. But I think I would like to, I would like to maybe do it. I'm a big fan of Key West, and I love going down there. In my life, I would like to, gravitate, and maybe live down there and maybe work out of Miami. And that's probably where you would find me when I say it's all said and done. That's really my goal, is to kind of do something. Who I think is an excellent judge, is a great person. Is on every panel. You can't dodge him if you like. Is Dana Klein. I definitely would like to be in his position. I think he does a wonderful job. I don't always agree with him, but you could definitely follow what he's doing. And he's a super human being, and definitely calls it like you see it. He sees it. You're definitely not going to, buffalo him. And he would be like a mentor for myself, to go, to follow, to go that way, being a younger judge. Because like I said, I wouldn't want to do it, for another 20 years, so yeah.
I have one more question for you, Lenny Brown.
Go ahead.
If you could meet the young Lenny Brown, say the 18 to 20-year-old Lenny Brown, is there any advice you'd give him now?
That's a good question. I can't believe I've never thought of this and you asked. I've heard you say this, and I guess, it would probably, maybe in those 20s, I got a little too lost in the game, and I probably should have went back. I came from a very strong Greek Orthodox family where family meant a lot. And if I could probably do it all over again, I didn't have to go to every dog show in America. Yeah. So I lost touch with some of those family members or close friends, and probably coming into today, and I don't get really invited to the family functions maybe that I should have, because I've kind of distanced myself.
Right. They know you're not going to show up because you're at a dog show. I got the same thing.
If I could change anything, it would have been, I didn't need to go to, I don't think Jim needed me for every show, where I probably should have attended some birthdays or some baptisms or some funerals, So probably family, I probably should have paid a little bit more, attention to, but I could probably work on that more now, later on. So, yeah.
Good answer. All right, man. Well, I enjoyed my time with you, buddy. It's good to catch up to you.
I'm glad you called me. I mean, it's, I'm like I said, I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and that's why I message you. I love to listen to them while I'm driving, because I don't need to hear them all. I don't need to see their face all the time. So I would just listen. I was driving, and they were just, all of them were excellent. I got to go back and do Valerie's, because I've never seen it. So
yeah, it was very good. She had a lot of good, interesting points, and her life was an interesting interview. It was very good. All right, man. Well, you can get back to work.
Okay, man. Thank you for everything.
All right, brother. You take care. Well, what'd you think? It was great. We knew it would be. Thanks, Lenny. It was great catching up to you. Hope you have a great Christmas. If you like what you're seeing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. If you want to find out what's happening in Will's world, go to willalexander.net. And if you want to get a hold of me, go to dogshowtips@gmail.com. Until later, talk to you guys.